Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of This Is HCD. My name is Gerry Scullion and I'm a human-centred service design practitioner based in the beautiful and the somewhat rainy day today in Dublin City, Ireland. Now, today on the show I'm joined by Chelsea Mauldin, an Executive Director of the Public Policy Lab in New York. Three things that really stood out in this conversation: the early battles. So Chelsea shares what it was like bringing service design into the US government when design was still thought of as throw pillows and dresses. The second thing is the shift, how Obama-era initiatives and municipal innovation labs helped build momentum for public services and design to thrive in the US culture. And the third thing, the reality check, why half the real work in government design happens after the design phase in the messy world of systems integration and change management. It's a fantastic conversation. Chelsea, I could speak to for hours. In fact, I could probably speak to for days. So if you're interested in design and really how it works within government, you're going to absolutely love this one. I know I learned an awful lot from Chelsea in the hour conversation that we had. Please, if you're listening, you enjoy what we do, don't forget to subscribe and like to this podcast. Share it out to all your friends if you're working in government. It's a great one. I know you're going to enjoy it. Let's jump straight in.
My background is I had a first career as a book editor. And at a certain point, I switched over to editing websites. Nice. And then rode the internet bubble up until at a certain point, I just thought, I don't think I can build another shopping cart. I'm unhappy. Doing this, helping people sell stuff. And at the time that I was doing that work, there wasn't really much of a codified theory of what we now call UX or UI. Yeah. And so I was thinking a lot about how do people navigate the intangible. Yeah. So I started reading a lot of kind of canonical urban planning stuff. Yeah. Because I thought, maybe I can understand better how people navigate the complex system of a city. Yeah. And that will help me think about how people might navigate a complex digital space.
What year was this, Chelsea?
This is 2001. Yeah. Something like that. And then I decided to go back to graduate school and study planning. So I ended up in a program at the LSE, which is half an urban design program and half a social theory program.
Okay.
So it was think about the city as a social construct and also think about the city as a designed construct.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you have noticed this amongst people who you've interviewed, but a bunch of us of my age, there are many service designers who trained as planners because I think it was about systems and patterns. Like that was a thing that you could go and study that was about systems and patterns before service design existed as a thing that you could study. So I began, after graduate school, I began working with government agencies on strategic urban design projects.
Nice.
And then that led to an opportunity with some colleagues here in New York to begin to try to bring strategic design to the federal government here in the United States. And once we began doing that, it just became clear, there's literally an endless number of government service design projects to be done in this country, and no one is doing them.
Yeah.
So we began doing the work of the Public Policy Lab in around 2009, and then we officially set up the organization in 2011.
Okay. So you're right at the forefront of design into government, and you would have been faced with probably bunting and balloons welcoming you in and giving you lots and lots of supplies, Post-its, Sharpie.
So you were there. You remember what it was like.
I do. And the cake was beautiful that day. It was so moist. What was it like? And And I'm looking for war stories here as well. So what was it like when you went in at the very start?
When one could talk oneself into a room with policymakers or people who were leading government programs in that time period, there was, generally speaking, no awareness of design as a strategic tool. There was an awareness of design as an aesthetic approach to the improvement of tangible things.
Yeah.
Oh, you will create a beautiful dress for me to wear to the Oscars. You will make decisions about what kinds of throw pillows should go on my sofa.
Yeah.
But there was no
interior design
sense that how a designer could be helpful to someone who was trying to deliver social services. So we spent a good bit of time in those early years just even sort of introducing conceptually what a design approach is to people inside of government. And luckily found some good partners in those early days who, for various reasons, had understood what we were talking about and were prepared to let us muck around inside of their systems to try to develop various forms of improvement.
Can I ask, in that time, and maybe it's still the same, so there's an assumption there, but socially and culturally in America, is it understood that design is more than just throw cushions and making a nice dress for the Oscars?
I mean, now, certainly.
Is it?
Now, yes.
It has changed. If so, what's changed? What's helped move that narrative along?
I think a combination of a few things. I think, good efforts by socially minded service and policy designers to actually engage in intelligent ways with public sector partners to do better service delivery. So there's like real and good, genuine efforts at good work. I think it became a marketing positioning offer for large consultancies serving government clients as well. And I think design in those contexts was sold as a smart thing from the private sector that government should also be making use of. Because there's a dominant narrative in US public services that the government is a bad provider.
Okay.
Because the market is the appropriate provider of value. So the government will always be a second-rate provider compared to the market. So in as much as government seeks to be a better provider, it better use market approaches. So design, I think, one way to position design as something attractive and desirable was to say, this is how leading government corporations do innovation. And then I think the final piece of it had to do with a dominant narrative in the US that in as much as there is public sector innovation, it is digital innovation. It is the creation of better digital tools and products. And that often created problems in that there was not a focus on human-to-human experiences or other mechanisms that human beings might access a policy-enabled service. But it did mean that a bunch of relatively smart technologists got invited in to do transformation efforts, and those smart technologists understood the necessity of doing good research and design to support whatever digital system they were implementing.
Yeah. So around the time that Public Policy Lab started, it would have been second term of Obama. Is that correct? Around that period. So I know Obama was leaning into design in quite a big way. So I guess that might have helped as well.
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. Digital Service was
Set up there
launching
then.
at the White House
Yeah,
as a design-driven team. 18F was launching inside of the
that's
General
right.
Services Administration to do digital transformation work. The lab at OPM inside of the Office of Personnel Management was really launching it as a real true service design practice.
Mm.
So there was that work occurring on the federal level. And then additionally, there were innovation teams um, sprouting up inside of municipal agencies.
Okay.
Bloomberg Philanthropies was very invested in bringing innovation capability into mayors' offices.
Yeah, New
So,
York was one, wasn't
not in New York for a variety of political reasons, but in many other cities across the country, Bloomberg was supporting innovation teams inside of mayoral offices, and they were uh, understood design to be one of the capabilities that should be on those innovation teams.
it? Mm.
Um, and then there were also, other, trying to think of those early days, like Boston set up a team called the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics,
Yeah.
led by Nigel Jacob. There was a team in San Francisco, a civic innovation team that launched not quite that early, a little bit later, run by Carrie Bishop, who had started FutureGov in UK. So, like, there was a there were simultaneous efforts happening on both the federal and the municipal level.
Yeah, groundswell.
Yeah.
So let's go back to when you were entering into government. I guess, like,
Sure.
you'd set up the public policy lab and you were starting to win work. What was that like at the coalface in the early days, and what did you have to do from a tactical perspective, I guess, to build trust?
I mean, I think what we uh, what we observed at a certain point, and to some large degree, this even still remains true, is that the people who are interested in bringing policy design and service design into government tend to be in strategic or innovation or futures oriented roles inside of executive government agencies. The folks who are in those roles typically are not sitting on top of operational delivery stacks.
Mm.
They are in an executive's office. They are in the Office of Strategic Planning. They are in some unit of government explicitly charged with thinking about future issues. But meanwhile, 90 or 95% of the effort and focus and money and labor of the agency is focused on the delivery of the current status quo of the service. So you are always having to do a sideways move from the people who have actually brought you in to do the work as an external partner to the people who actually own the policy delivery stack that you are attempting to put interventions into. So that question of how do you develop trust and shared intentions across really two different teams that you're interacting with. The team that has a set of strategic requirements and desires of your work, and the operations folks who actually have to live with whatever it is that you are designing and then operate it after you have disappeared.
So what was the public policy lab? How is that set up? Was it set up as a business? And how is
Set
it
up as
positioned to not for profit?
Yes.
So not for profit, but it was sit.
I will sadly never be wealthy.
Maybe this podcast goes out.
I wrote off profit from the very beginning.
So it was set up, and like, how did you position it with government entities at that stage? Because I know it was positioned more like a partner versus like a consultancy or shared service. Can you talk to me about that a bit more?
Absolutely. And it very much it's a thing that we have always felt was pretty important, which was to say to government partners, uh, you are not our client.
Yeah.
You, government entity, are not the client of this organization. The client of this organization is members of the public
Yeah.
who we are attempting to deliver better services for. You are our partner in that effort. We share a mutual client. So let's work together to try to figure out how a better policy or service can be enabled for the members of the public
I love that.
we are mutually attempting to serve. And I feel like that has given us also a positionality where we're not always 100% in agreement with our partners. There are, there are times when what we would like to do or how we would like to alter a service or how we would like to engage with the public is maybe not exactly what our government partners would choose or desire.
Sure.
Because we're often explicitly engaged in a question around how do we alter the balance of power between the public and the state.
Absolutely.
And
that forces them to relinquish some power, presumably.
I'd like to think of power as being non-finite. So they don't have to give anything up.
Okay.
They just have to allow other people to have more. There's no set amount of power that has to be redistributed.
Yeah.
There's just the capacity for expansion.
Yeah. I really respect that. Can I talk about the reactions to when you first went in and where it's at today and what has shifted in that time? Because we're looking at 14, 15 years.
Right.
And how have you seen it shift? Or maybe what were the sort of the catalysts for that change?
One thing that we began, and I can only tell you the story from the very narrow spot where we
100%.
sat, was that somewhere around, 2015, 2016, we had this realization after we had been doing the work for 4 or 5 years that it was possible to get people to invest in a human-centered innovation process, both with capital and time and resources, an innovation process that they then could not or would not implement. So you could actually get to the point of deployable designs, deployable interventions, and then they would not be deployed. And so that became a bit of a sort of fascination and obsession of ours. Why is it that people are willing to procure innovation that they then can't use?
Yeah.
And I will swear to you that it wasn't because we were delivering something unworkable. It wasn't that we were delivering, prototypes for flying cars. Like, it was just literally it became clear to us that getting to the point of an implementable intervention in a system was essentially half the project, and that the other half of the project was a systems integration and change management project that had to be treated with the same care and intentionality as the initial process of research and design.
Wow. That's a nice framing when you think about it, that half the work happens after delivery. And it speaks to an awful lot of kind of the work that I do, particularly anyway, but I know a lot of other service designers. I know Sarah Drummond, for one, speaks about this.
Yeah.
When the rubber hits the road, let's talk a bit more about what that looks like.
Yeah. So, Sarah and I met when we were both 12 at the...
Wow. And look at you now, you're 29. That's amazing.
We met at a service design global conference in, I think, San Francisco in about 2011 or 2012. Someone will know what year that was.
Yeah.
The service design global conference was then. But it's been, it was obviously wonderful to watch her build Snook up.
Absolutely.
into the powerhouse that it was. And we were able to collaborate one time on one little project that we did around developing a set of design patterns for digital tools for mental health provision.
Yeah. That's a while ago now, though. That's 2016 or something, was it?
Yeah.
It's around that time. I'm probably a bit wrong on that. Maybe it's a little bit later, but yeah. So generally speaking, it's. You think that's where it's at now? So when you're doing projects for government, maybe 50% of the time that's budgeted is around the implementation and helping them navigate that change.
What we see is that, it's often difficult, but still we are often doing projects with government agencies that have never done a full cycle service design project.
Yeah.
We observe that it is difficult for people to, sorry, the sounds of
all right. I love external sounds on podcasts.
New York is never quiet. We will often with a partner, the first time we partner with them, we have an expectation that they will often not want to commit from the very beginning to going all the way through scaled implementation, because they don't know us or trust us yet, nor should they. So we will often get to the point of having design concepts, or maybe even we will get to the point of having deployable prototypes and a piloting plan for them. And then sometimes we will wait while they think about the whether they want to go forward with actually deploying the thing into their system. But what we find is once we have done that once or twice with a partner, then they are often willing to, for future projects, say, yes, we'll commit up front to the longer time frame that is going to be necessary to actually take these interventions out to pilot, do an evaluation of them, and then think about scaled system-wide implementation.
Okay. I mean, that makes total sense on where we're at now, because I think a lot of people listening to the podcast will probably nod along with this. When it comes to doing work in private sector, it might be a little bit easier to go all the way through to implementation, but it's kind of a hurry up and wait scenario in government, what I'm seeing. So it's a case of like, yeah, we're doing it. This is a great workshop. And then ghosting for 3 or 4 weeks. And I'm like, where have you gone? Like, what happened? Did I say something? Was the food bad? And then it comes back around again. It just takes a lot longer. So my follow-on question to that, Chelsea, just I want to understand, how do you, as a not-for-profit, you also have to keep the lights on. How do you budget for those slowdown in the cadence of projects?
So 5 or 6 years ago, we adopted a kind of agile software development model to doing public sector service delivery. So when we scope a project, we scope it as a series of releases, each release resulting in some tangible deliverable product, which we will share with our partners. And each one of those releases is built out of a set of 2-week sprints of work. And so and we don't deviate from schedule. Like, all of our projects run to schedule. But what we will do is essentially pause a project. So we will say to a partner, okay, we're going to get you through release 4, which in our framework is design concepts, scoping, preparing for research, conducting research, and then design concepting. Essentially the outputs of synthesis. And at that point, we can stop, and you can go off and contemplate whether you want to move forward with us actually developing prototypes out of these concepts. But while the project is running, it runs to the cadence controlled by our team. Okay.
So do you sit within the government agency itself when you're doing that work, or do you tends to be probably distributed, or do you have your own offices in New York?
We have our own offices in New York. We have a couple of members of team, I think 3 or 4 now who are not in New York City, but they're all members of our team who previously were in New York City.
Yeah.
And we come into the office a couple of days a week, just because like that ability to know one another and collaborate
100%.
with one another in person is so important, I think, for the work. It was a pretty miserable period during the pandemic trying to do all of the work remotely. And the moment that we could stop doing synthesis, doing research and synthesis remotely, we went back to doing it in person because it's just so much better. I just really, no offense to anyone who is conducting remote research and synthesis, but I would argue that both the work outputs and also the work experience is much better when you actually get to be with
Absolutely. One of my clients, well, a couple of my clients actually, they're building the capability internally, and their office space isn't fit for purpose from a service design perspective.
Sure.
And they don't have walls to hang the artifacts up that are created by not only by myself but other agencies as well. So, to quote Lisa Reichel, like, you hang the thing, show the thing, should I say, it's not possible. Right. And even though you speak to executive directors and, you go higher than that and say, listen, look, you need to think that this isn't, doing work. This is knowledge work. This is really, you need thinking space. You need to really process an awful lot of stuff. Do you have to help navigate that kind of quandary with clients to say, if you want to actually inform this transformation, things are going to have to change a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, we will often bring partners to our studio and have them spend the day with us, or even come for longer periods of time. And I am both embarrassed by and committed to certain environmental fetishes of the service design experience, and
talk to me, Chelsea. Tell us what is
like, one, you need walls, and you ideally need walls that you not only can pin things to, you need walls that you can write on.
Why do you feel embarrassed about that though? Like, because I presume that's not the fetish. I'm just going to say that's the embarrassed one.
Because it is, of course, everything we do is actually a process of mental manipulation.
Yeah.
And of course, one can do that mental manipulation purely internally, purely cognitively. But it is certainly easier to do that manipulation with the appropriate prompts.
Yeah.
Similarly, why do we all use sticky notes? Because sticky notes allow you to put a single idea on a piece of paper and then be able to tangibly move ideas in space to create relationships between ideas. Yeah. So you can do that in your head, but it is easier to do that if you don't have to do it in your head, and particularly if you're trying to do it with other people. Yeah. So there's a way in which...
Come on, hit us. We're all bracing ourselves. You said that's an embarrassment and a fetish. So is the fetish the wall?
Well, the need for the prop, like it's I would like to tell you that we could all be as effective purely using our minds.
Yeah.
But in fact, teams are going to be more effective if they have the appropriate props.
100%. It's funny, I've heard the argument said like, oh, well, you can do it in Mural or Miro. I've been to other tech offices and they're doing it. I says, yeah, but they're probably super mature in their design function. I says, when you're more lower in your design function, you need to be able to show that thing, to build the momentum, to show the work. Is there an argument in that?
Absolutely. And I think, but I don't even know that I would say it has to do with maturity. I think that the tools can be distractions. So during the pandemic, when we couldn't be together to do data collection and synthesis, we obviously moved all of our data collection and synthesis processes into digital tools. And in a certain way, that allowed us to significantly increase the social science rigor of the work that we were doing. Now we have a big database of a whole bunch of individual data units, all of which have been tagged, and we can manipulate that database. But also what we observed is that then the team is spending so much time tagging and manipulating the data that they don't have enough time left to actually think creatively about what that data is suggesting about people's experience. So we are actually very deliberately in the last couple of years thinking about how do we dial back, or how do we replace certain digital processes with a return to non-digital processes so that we can allow teams to have more open-ended ideation space, as opposed to like data manipulation.
Yeah. You kind of inferred thick data there.
Yeah.
Trisha Wang's term. Can you talk to me about really about the, encouraging the use of that kind of mindset about thick data and the management of data at that within a government level? Because I actually spoke to Dana Chisnell last week about this, and Dana was like, maybe research repositories aren't that good. Maybe they can slow us down, because in their perspective, it could take 4 or 5 years to get a tool like Dovetail or something through the process of procurement. Right. What's your thoughts on this as regards research repositories? And I guess we're going to have to put those two letters together, AI, which is artificial intelligence for people out there who haven't heard about AI. I'm joking.
Where are those people?
Yeah, exactly. What's your thought around the kind of repository piece and AI and management of this within government when it's so new,
Well, I should say in full disclosure that we are in the midst of building a significant data repository. So
in New York?
Well, in
Public Policy Lab.
Yeah.
Where?
I said in the cloud.
In the cloud, okay, yeah.
So the data repository that we're building, the first version of it lives online at thepeoplesay.org. And what we have been doing is conducting research with older adults across the United States in multiple communities, and doing multimedia research collection with them so that we end up with video. And then putting that video online in a way which is searchable.
Chelsea, so the rest of the podcast, this is what we're going to talk about.
So that you can go there and
thing.
Yeah.
Okay, go on. Tell us. I'm dying to hear more about it.
So here is where I have felt that there were some problematic things in the civic research space that we were not resolving, that multiple of us were researching the same issues, the same problems that particularly Americans with lower incomes were experiencing and attempting to access social safety net services. We were all doing the research, but no one had any access to anybody else's research.
Yeah.
We were all doing this. We were all discovering interrelated issues, but we had no way of sharing it or building off anyone else's work. And this felt really kind of fundamentally problematic. The analogy I've been using is like, if every time a physicist wanted to do some physics, they had to sort of reprove the laws of gravity, like physics would not have advanced very far. So there was an issue around that, around the data being collected not being accessible and reusable. It also meant that, the labor of doing qualitative research collection and synthesis, it kept being redeployed to explore the same issues as opposed to digging deeper into issues that had already been explored.
Yeah.
And then it also felt to me like if you've conducted this kind of research, how powerful it is and how as a researcher, it transforms you. It transforms your understanding of people and the world to hear people talk about their experiences. And yet, the researcher is the only one typically who is privileged to really hear those stories.
Yeah.
And then we do this sort of transmittal of the stories to people who have power and who wield power.
Yeah.
And that felt like we were like not capitalizing on the power of the stories that we were hearing.
Yeah.
And that if we could actually have policymakers hear people talking about their lives, see them, that we would be able to much more effectively advocate for change. So we became committed to the idea that we needed to do multimedia research, and we needed to find ways to make that multimedia research public.
Wow. I am in love with this idea. Okay, right. So was this a brainchild of Chelsea, or was this a brainchild of the team? And I'd love to know, what was the first steps that you went through that to really kind of flesh out if this was viable? And then there's another question there around management of the data and other people who are not public policy lab. How do you handle that relationship?
Right. So a bunch of these problems that I'm describing are ones that had obviously been sort of like floating around in my head, things that I obviously would talk to my colleagues about. But really, I think what lit a spark for me was a project actually run in the UK called Engage Britain, where a team led by Miriam Levin recruited 100 statistically representative UK residents to participate in a series of conversations around policy issues. And I just thought, oh, that's fascinating. It's fascinating that what she's constituted there is a statistically representative pool of nationwide residents, but she's recruited them not for survey work, she's recruited them for qualitative research. And so that sort of started me thinking about what kinds of equivalents to that could operate in PPL's work. And that ultimately led to this idea to create really a three-part tool. One, a standing panel of Americans to whom we could return for longitudinal civic research, a repository that allowed us to collect the data from the people with whom we conducted research, and then a kind of public portal that allowed all of that data to be accessible and searchable by researchers and policymakers. So we were sort of ready with that idea, but no outlet for it. When some wonderful colleagues at a foundation out of California called the SCAN Foundation, a philanthropy that focuses on improving policy and service delivery, particularly in the healthcare space for older adults, came to us and were asking us if we could do some research with them and for them. And we said, yes, but can we do it in this particular way that we want to try to do it, where we actually collect the data and in a multimedia way and then make it publicly available? And bless them, they were like, yeah, this sounds like a great idea. So we have been now in close partnership with the SCAN Foundation for the past couple of years, PPL's team conducting the research, really focusing on the policy experiences and needs of older Americans. And for us, the next step is to take this V1 version of the standing pool of respondents and the repository and the platform and turn that into a V2 version, which is accessible to any civic researcher who wants to have similar capabilities.
So that any other civic researcher, how do they provide their authenticity? Because without the lack of unions or any of this kind of stuff, how do you get around that?
I think that what we will need to do, if we can actually get to the point where we're building this tool, is we will want to do some vetting
Yeah.
of the researchers who we are making the platform available to. And that, obviously, if you're going to collect data from folks with the intention of making it publicly available, and particularly multimedia research where people's faces are visible, their voice is audible,
Yeah.
we go through a very detailed consent process to uh, be certain that our respondents actually understand what we are collecting information from them for, and that they are genuinely comfortable with their story being public.
So an informed consent.
So really making sure that consent process is good and ethical is going to be super important. We obviously pay everyone for participation.
Yeah.
So we will have a set of essentially professional requirements that we would need to pass on to anyone else who uses the platform.
Of course.
Yeah.
So what kind of data are you taking? Personal identifiable data like names and date of birth? And
we want to know as little as possible in the realm of that kind of PII. Like, we are not asking anybody for their date of birth. We ask them, we track an age range, for example, not a birthday. We are obviously not asking anybody for their identification, their social security number in the United States, which is the national identification number.
Yeah.
We are consenting people to allow us to retain their contact information because we want to be able to go back to them over time. But we obviously keep all of that PII in a separate database from where we keep all of their story data. Everyone is assigned an alias. They also get to contest their alias. Like, if they don't like the alias that we've assigned them, they can tell us they want a different alias.
Yeah.
So we're not using people's real names. And then before we publish the data publicly, we scrub it. So in as much as anyone is saying, oh, I went over to my sister Mary's, we're going to scrub Mary out of the data. So that those kinds of personal identifiers and other,
I'm actually feeling rumblings in the ground here of GDPR in Central Europe. They're just going and how that would actually work in Europe. But generally speaking, what's the outcome that you're hoping to achieve by doing this? And how would you measure that?
Sure, multiple outcomes. The measurement question, of course, is a thornier one. But we are interested in helping policymakers, people who are elected officials or appointed officials, better hear and understand the needs of members of the public when they are making policy decisions. And we have already seen some interest where, the staffs of members of Congress have been interested in seeing this video data, for example.
Yeah.
We are interested in supporting people who run programs inside of agencies better understand their beneficiaries or clients' needs so that they can actually change service delivery. So we've had a number of people who were in executive roles of government agencies share the data repository with their staff members, for example, and say, you need to go and look at this stuff so that you can understand this one service delivery problem that we're trying to address. We are interested in supporting researchers in better understanding what is going on in the world. So we've had a number of researchers use data from the repository to support academic research articles. But where we think it will actually be super helpful for civic and design researchers is that you don't have to then re-research things that are already known or knowable, that you can actually build on knowledge rather than having to re-demonstrate knowledge.
Yeah, I love that, because there's certain aspects of, when you're researching, going back over old ground, it is kind of like hearing the same story over and over again, but being able to cut that out of the process and, focusing at a much targeted perspective when you're researching would be much more rewarding. Plus, government doesn't have to pay for all that inefficiency as well. which usually, I'm sure, gets people excited in government. Can I talk to you about one other thing? Because I know I'm taking up an awful lot of your time. But policy prototyping. Okay, so whenever you're working within government and you hit that wall where you're saying, well, actually, the policy says this, and this is like a bone of contention for designers, because they go out and do the research and they say the policy needs to change, and then it doesn't happen. What advice, and if you could give this in under 50 words or less, I'm joking and bringing it back to you, like if you had a set of keys to unlock the policy prototyping mindset, what would work in 50 words or less?
Well, I want
Because
to
that's a
say
really hard one.
very quickly about the word policy, because I
Right.
think we use a single word to mean at least three different things.
Okay.
There is legislation, there is statute law, things that people who are elected to sit in the legislature, they pass a law, and that law enables some action by government and or appropriates money for the government to spend. So that is a certain kind of policymaking. Then there is a sort of policy of rules and regulations.
Yeah.
The enabling legislation has occurred, but now the executive agency or the ministry in a parliamentary context has to actually figure out how they're going to regulate or implement whatever the new policy is.
Yeah.
And then there is what we think of as like the little p, the policy of everyday systems and program decision making done inside of delivery organizations.
Okay.
All three of those things could rightly be called policy. You're obviously going to have to approach using or inserting a human-centered point of view into those different contexts quite differently. Like I was just talking with another colleague about how legislative staffs have constituent services teams, people whose job it is to receive calls from the public, people who are having trouble with some service, and it's the job of that legislative staff to try to solve that problem. But those folks are essentially qual researchers. They too are collecting stories from the public and attempting to respond to them. So how do we provide a set of design strategies and design tools to those folks who are working inside of constituent services teams in legislative offices? Meanwhile, in a delivery stack, there are going to be people in leadership decisions with whom you can have a conversation about full cycle service design. How do we actually invent a set of new tools and materials that can be inserted at every level of operations inside of government to alter the way that the service feels and is deployed?
Yeah.
So I guess my fewer than 50 words answer is you have to know what kind of policy you're attempting.
You're going after. It's hard to speak in 50 words or less, isn't it? Just putting it out there. Chelsea gave me a little bit of a task before about what I did, and I tried to do it within 50 words, and I spoke for 4 minutes. So can I just, on a very kind of tactical level, your role within PPL, as you refer to it as, versus somebody who's probably doing research or service design, they're more on the tools, so to speak. What does your role entail? Are you still on the tools, or is it mostly kind of communicating at a strategic level to build the pipeline of work?
I have attempted, to the great relief of my team, to get out of their hair and let a bunch of smart professionals do their job.
Yeah.
And they are, of course, thinking about what we tend to refer to as tools and materials, meaning everything from, digital, systems to hard copy forms and everything that spans in between. But they are strategic, many of them very strategic thinkers who are also interested in questions of how do you change the ways that people in leadership positions operate public systems.
Yeah.
So a good bit of their work is also thinking about what kinds of mental models, what kinds of interaction models, what kinds of new strategic approaches to thinking about the service delivery can they design and share and collaborate with leadership folks about to change the ways in which a service, like the posture of the service toward the public's needs.
Yeah.
I sadly do not do that work anymore, except in as much as I occasionally dive bomb in and have complaints about people's comma placement.
Yeah.
But
in your perspective,
yeah,
when the conversations, not if the conversation anymore, comes around to AI within government, and that, I know most government agencies aren't probably set up for the best use of AI yet. They're still struggling with, trying to get the latest version of Excel and Outlook and Teams working in some organizations. How do you handle that conversation, and what advice do you have to government organizations who are potentially internally hearing this huge desire for AI and wanting to apply it in the civic space?
I mean, I feel like in some ways this is just the same conversation we've been having for 10 or 15 years about the use of digital service delivery as well. A kind of a desire to say, well, can't we just make an app and have the public go use that app? And I feel that in a United States context in particular, this is not a nation that has any respect for or sense of common cause with the poor. Like, I think that in an American context, living in poverty is seen as a personal failing, as opposed to a thing that has any kind of institutional or social roots. And therefore, there is a sort of desire to not have to engage with the lives of the poor, the needs of the poor. And I think that digital tools provide a distancing opportunity. Let us withdraw from the bodies of the poor, and AI seems to me to be a further elaboration of that tendency in the American context.
Yeah.
That being said, and if I had $1 for every time I'd made this argument, like, we are still walking around inside of bodies and living embodied lives. And as long as that is the case, there is going to be the necessity of human beings to engage with each other as other living embodied creatures. It will never be sufficient to, abstract ourselves out to some kind of, pure data representation.
I understand.
So I think it is fundamentally wrong-headed to think that one can replace humans with non-human representations.
Yeah. Especially in relational contexts.
Right.
Yeah.
Can we use AI as a useful tool? Sure. I also use spell check as a useful tool. Like, there are all kinds, that is a glib comparison, but like, there are all kinds of ways in which we can use digital systems and digital tools to enhance our human experience. But I would propose to you that, as of yet, at least, we should not be attempting to replace us.
And again, I feel like I'm putting words in your bit, but what are the risks in automating, say, frontline interactions with AI from your perspective?
Oh, well, I think the obvious risks of people are complex and unpredictable.
Yeah.
And the ability of digital systems to respond to the particularity of an individual human being and their life context and their needs and their preferences and their aspirations, as of yet, we don't have systems that are subtle enough to be able to do that.
I love it. Can I just ask one final question, and then you're off the hook, and then you can go and finish your coffee, okay? I'm really enjoying this conversation. Looking ahead, we both probably have 15, 20 years left in work, professional work, I'd say, ahead of us. What does civic design look like when it comes to the point where you're kind of going, yeah, I think I'm done? What does it look like from your perspective?
I mean, there are two things that I'm very much focused on working on, at least for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
I would like to get to my villa in the south of France sooner.
What? You have a villa?
But I'm working my way toward one.
Nice.
The first is this thing that I've already talked about in the context of the data repository. Like, how do we make all of this work that we are doing more public and more open? We were recently able to do a project where we helped the city of New York redesign all of the application and onboarding processes for a major affordable housing, social housing program. And then we were able to go to the federal government and say, hey, we just did all of this work for one of the largest public housing authorities in the country. Can we figure out how to make this work available for all the other public housing authorities in America? Yeah. And we have now done some of that work. So this question of how do we increase the scale of the value that we can deliver by figuring out how to make the work that we do more publicly available and more open for remixing, rebuilding, readaptation by other government partners. So that is sort of thing one. The other thing I am very interested in is this question of time scale of innovation. I feel like many of us who are doing service design work in government, there are like real problems right now. And we are often trying to design interventions for systems for more or less immediate deployment.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, there are a bunch of smart people thinking about like long-term futures. How do we think about, climate issues on a 20, 50, 100-year scale? But it feels to me like there is this missing time frame that I've come to think of as the next administration time frame. It's, in the US, we have 4-year political cycles. How do you design for a future which is going to come into being 6 to 10 years from now, when potentially a different political party is in power than at any level of government? How do you create those, how do you design for deployment of services that are wholly new systems approaches and integrate that with the reality of political cycles, which are not necessarily invested in doing work that's going to benefit the next administration?
That would require a whole rethink of the structure of government, and presumably.
Or maybe, I'm a service designer. I believe that I believe I can design the future in a variety of ways. So the question is how to take what we all know about inventing things that don't yet exist and think about doing that in a complex political environment of the not right now.
Yeah. Wow. Look, Chelsea, I'm going to wrap it on that because that is a nice one to leave us on. I'm going to put a link to the Public Policy Lab into the show notes of this. If it's okay, I'll put a link to your LinkedIn.
Please do. And also put a link to the People Say, which is our data repository.
Absolutely. I'm going to check that out now as well myself.
Great.
Is there anything else you want to give it a shout out to? Anything else that you're working on that maybe people might be interested?
Two things. If people watch this anytime soon, I will be at the World Design Congress in London now next week. Wow. And would love to chat with anybody who wants to come chat with me. And then the week after that, I will be in Helsinki for the annual conference of all the applied ethnographers, EPIC.
Very cool.
So if anyone is at Epic in Helsinki with my friend and colleague Marco Steinberg, who was the founder of the Helsinki Design Lab and who now teaches at Aalto University, we'll be running a little side event on design and democracy. So if people are interested in that, look out for news of that.
Fantastic. Listen, Chelsea, I wrap up every episode in This Is HCD by thanking people for their vulnerability, because I know you come on here, you don't know which way the conversation is going to go. It does require a certain amount of vulnerability. So thank you for your time and just giving me the space as well to ask these questions. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Gerry, it was a pleasure and so good to talk to you. And I hope that you are able to edit out all of the construction noise in my background.
We don't. We leave it all in. Adds to the magic of it all. Thanks so much.
Well, great speaking with you. And please be in touch if you'll be in New York anytime soon.